The ranger warned us to leave before dark. We laughed when he said it. By midnight, we were sitting in a dead car, listening to someone outside call my brother's name in our mother's voice. Our mother had been dead for 3 years. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. My brother Daniel, our friend Marcus, and I had driven deep into a remote forest in the mountains. The campground was supposed to be closed for the season, but the gate was open, and there was no one around to stop us. Except for an old ranger standing beside a wooden station near the entrance. He watched us unload our bags. Then he said, "You shouldn't stay here tonight." Marcus laughed. "We're only staying one night." The ranger didn't smile. He looked toward the trees. "If you're still here after dark, don't wait until morning to leave." Daniel asked him if there was a bear problem. The ranger finally looked at us. "If you hear someone calling your name from the forest, don't answer." We laughed again. Then he added, "Especially if it sounds like someone you know." That was the last thing he said to us. By sunset, we had set up our tent. The forest became completely silent. No insects, no birds, no wind. Around 10:30 that night, we were sitting beside the fire when a voice came from the trees. "Daniel?" My brother immediately looked up. It sounded exactly like our mother. Nobody moved. Our mother had died 3 years earlier. The voice came again. "Daniel?" This time, it sounded closer. Marcus whispered, "Don't answer." Daniel stared toward the trees. Then the voice called his name a third time. From behind us. We turned around. There was nothing there. We didn't wait any longer. We packed our things and ran to the car. Daniel turned the key. Nothing happened. He tried again. The engine wouldn't start. The headlights flickered once, then went out. We were completely surrounded by darkness. Marcus checked his phone. No signal. I looked toward the trees. Something was standing between them. A person. Tall. Motionless. Watching us. Daniel turned on his flashlight. The figure was gone. Then someone knocked on the driver's side window. 3 times. Daniel slowly turned his head. A face was standing outside the glass. It looked like our mother. Daniel screamed and turned the key again. This time, the engine started. He slammed the car into reverse and drove toward the entrance. None of us looked back. Until Marcus suddenly shouted, "Stop!" Daniel hit the brakes. Marcus was staring at the road behind us. There were footprints in the mud. Bare human footprints. They began at the edge of the forest and followed the exact path our car had taken. We drove straight to the ranger station. The old man was waiting outside, as if he already knew we were coming. Daniel jumped out of the car. "What was that?" The ranger looked at him. "Did it use a voice you recognized?" Daniel went silent. The ranger nodded. "That's why I told you to leave before dark." I asked him what was in the forest. He looked past us toward the trees. "We don't know." Then he said, "Every year, someone hears a voice they recognize. Sometimes they answer. Sometimes they follow it." I looked back toward the road. The footprints were still there, but the ranger was staring at the mud beside the station. There was another set of footprints there. Bare feet. Fresh. They started at the edge of the forest and ended just a few feet from where the ranger was standing. The ranger saw them. His face changed. He reached for his rifle. "Get back in the car." Daniel asked him why. The ranger didn't answer. Because from somewhere behind the station, my mother's voice called my name. I froze. Then the voice spoke again. This time, it sounded exactly like me. The fire lookout had been abandoned for almost 10 years. That was what the sign at the bottom of the mountain said. So when we saw a light moving inside the tower at 2:13 in the morning, we assumed someone had broken in. We were wrong. My friend Jake and I had driven into the mountains to check a trail camera we had placed near an old fire lookout. The camera had been recording deer for weeks, but 3 nights earlier, it captured something neither of us could explain. A person standing inside the abandoned lookout. The problem was, the lookout was locked. The photograph had been taken at 2:13 a.m. We decided to go there ourselves. The hike took almost an hour. By the time we reached the top, it was completely dark. The lookout stood above the trees on 4 old wooden legs. The windows were broken. The door was locked with a heavy chain. Nobody could have been inside. At least, that's what we thought. We found our trail camera attached to a tree about 30 feet from the tower. Jake removed the memory card. Then he checked the last photograph. His face changed. "What?" I asked. He turned the screen toward me. The photograph showed the lookout. The same broken windows, the same locked door. But this time, someone was standing in the highest window, looking directly at the camera. We both looked up. The window was empty. Jake laughed nervously. Probably some reflection. Then a light appeared inside the tower. A small yellow light, moving slowly behind the windows. We froze. "Someone's up there," Jake whispered. I told him the door was locked. He didn't answer. The light moved from one window to another, then stopped. Right above us, we heard a sound from inside the tower. A slow creak, like someone walking across the wooden floor. Jake took out his flashlight. Maybe someone really is in there. We walked toward the stairs. The first few steps were covered in dust. There were no footprints. The chain was still wrapped around the door, and the lock was completely intact. Jake reached toward it. Then we heard something hit the floor above us. A heavy sound. We both stepped back. The yellow light disappeared. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then something moved behind the highest window. A figure, standing perfectly still. We could see its outline through the broken glass. Jake whispered, "There's no way." The figure slowly turned toward us. I raised my flashlight. The beam reached the window. The figure was gone. We ran back to the trail camera. Jake checked the screen again. The latest photograph had been taken only seconds earlier. It showed us standing beside the tower. I was looking up. Jake was standing next to me. But there was a third person in the photograph, standing directly behind us. We turned around. Nothing. The forest was empty. Jake started removing the camera from the tree. Then he stopped. Wait. He zoomed in on the photograph. But there was a third person in the photograph, standing directly behind us. We turned around. Nothing. The forest was empty. Jake started removing the camera from the tree. Then he stopped. Wait. He zoomed in on the photograph. The figure behind us was facing away from the camera. It was looking toward the lookout, and it was wearing the same jacket Jake had on. Jake slowly looked down at himself, then back at the screen. The figure in the photograph was standing several feet behind him. But the photograph had been taken while he was standing beside me. He dropped the camera. We started running down the mountain. Neither of us looked back until we heard footsteps behind us. One set, slowly following. We ran faster. The footsteps did too. Then Jake suddenly stopped. I grabbed his arm. "What are you doing?" He pointed toward the trail ahead. There was another trail camera attached to a tree, one we had never placed there. Its red recording light was blinking. I walked closer. The camera was pointed directly at us. Jake whispered, "How long has that been there?" Then my phone vibrated. I looked down. There was a new photograph on the trail camera app. It had been uploaded seconds earlier. The image showed the two of us standing on the trail. But this time, there were 3 figures. One behind Jake. One behind me. And one standing at the top of the mountain. Inside the abandoned fire lookout. The light in the tower turned on again. And this time, we could see someone standing in the window, holding a camera.